If you'd asked young Dwayne when he first started playing Dungeons and Dragons that one day we'd arrive at a point where there were over 100 character class combinations and over 30 different player races, would have blew my mind. But that's where we're at. Follow me and we'll talk about how to reduce the bloat in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Welcome back, Maverick Gamers. Well, it's time to bust out those calculators. We're going to figure out exactly how many combinations there are between races and classes in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Actually, on second thought, it's a mess. I'm not going to make you do that. But suffice to say, it is a mess. And right now, I think the biggest challenge that I have as a Dungeon Master is that when I bring players together who have played Dungeons and Dragons already and want to start a new campaign or a new adventure, inevitably it turns to just opening up the books and just pouring through all the vast amount of options that are available to the players. Now, sadly, all of this turns to a meta mindset, which means basically they're digging in and trying to look at the best possible race class combinations that are going to give them the most upper hand. Now, there are some players who actually are digging into the lore and the background and trying to create a cool synergy between flavor and game mechanics, but those are very few far between. Right now, Dungeons & Dragons doesn't look like it's easing its foot off the gas pedal as far as giving players a multitude of options and in some cases just mind-numbing amount. Now, when I used to play D&D when I was a kid, the biggest flavor that came into the game and the biggest choices we had to make were very much limited. We had essential classes and subclasses didn't really exist. A lot of the add-on flavor and variables came is how we played the character and some of the things like titles that we gave our characters to sort of set them apart from just the vanilla flavored character classes that were in the book. So if any of you are brave enough on your next D&D campaign that you start, I dare you to tell the players that there aren't going to be any subclasses in this campaign. Get ready for the backlash. But in all honesty, D&D doesn't need subclasses in order to be engaging. Again, I try not to go too far back into my moaning and bemoaning about my earlier days of playing Dungeons & Dragons, but really, the foundation of Dungeons & Dragons isn't based on just what class you take and what subclasses you'll inevitably be able to choose when you get to level 3. I started playing D&D when there was a fighter, thief, wizard, elf, dwarf, halfling, basically just essentially basic character classes. Now, it didn't diminish my enjoyment of the game. In actual fact, it just encouraged me to be a lot more creative. Now, one of the cool things about D&D when it first arrived was that they actually leaned into title system. Whenever you leveled up your character, you'd arrive at your new level, you'd roll hit points, and the real challenge for us, or at least my play group, was chasing that title, being known as something else in your game world, whether that be a footpad or a cavalier or something to that nature, where your title sort of gave you a unique flavor as to what your character could do. I think that's been lost in Dungeons & Dragons, and now everybody's just chasing subclasses as what you can do with your character and not what you actually do when you're playing the game. Okay, so if you're not like me and just love reverse engineering current 5e rules, then take a different approach to it. If you can't really stop the power creep or stop the players from wanting to just embrace the subclass system, move the goalpost a bit. Right now, as stands, 900 experience points brings you to level 3. Now, I talk about experience points in another video of mine that you can find on my channel, but if you can extend the amount of abilities that they get or the subclass options, move it out a little bit. Rather than bestowing upon them at a level 3, make them work for it a little bit more. Maybe set it as a level 5 benchmark. Give the players something to chase rather than just sort of throwing at them as soon as they get started on their adventuring careers. Moving the goalposts means that they still get the subclass system, they just have to wait a little bit longer before they actually get to enjoy it. Now, I know this sounds funny, but titles is a really interesting thing to motivate your players to want to level up. Now, like I said, we didn't have subclasses when I first started playing D&D, so titles and roleplay elements were a big thing as to why we wanted to level up. Not to mention the chase for a land grab, which allowed us basically to create castles of our own, but having that title slapped onto the edge of our name really gave us sort of a pride. And when we got together as players, we would often look at each other's titles and say, hey, I'm level 3, I'm this. The other thing to consider is that within the world of your fantasy campaign, you gotta understand that as characters level up, they're acquiring a reputation. Titles are a way to really solidify that reputation to the players. So give the players a sense that their levels aren't just a game mechanic, but an actual living, breathing part of the world. They're actually growing in reputation and fame as their character levels up. That should also be motivation for characters wanting to play. Okay, so I think we've decided that removing subclasses from D&D 5e in any future iterations is pretty much going to be impossible. lest you draw the ire of your players. Now, we can agree on the fact that maybe making subclasses a little bit more important, put an emphasis on the actual abilities that they get as an important landmark in their development, whether it be moving the goalposts or just waiting to that special event that occurs, or building the character up to achieve that subclass level is something that we can all do to sort of make players understand that, hey, there was a time when D&D didn't have subclasses and you weren't just power-monger characters working to get that latest and greatest power. I hope you're all having fun playing Dungeons & Dragons out there, and we'll talk to you soon. Before you go, I need your help. I'm trying to grow the exposure of what we do here at Maverick Games. My goal is to actually bring information to parents and students for fun, academics, and even support of neurodivergency. Please subscribe, and make sure you click on those notifications. I don't do paid ads or sponsorships. I hope that you can find content here that's enjoyable for yourself and maybe others. Thank you very much, and thanks for tuning in.